Welcome back, everybody. Ready for your daily financial news.
Always. Let's go.
All right, so Intel just dodged a bullet, legally speaking. Remember that lawsuit from investors who claimed they hid losses in their foundry business?
Oh, yeah. The one that caused that huge drop in market value back in 23.
That's the one. Well, a judge just dismissed the whole thing.
That's gotta be a huge relief for them. But they're still behind competitors like NVIDIA and TSMC, especially with all the AI chips taking off right now.
Right.
Intel's really banking on that 18A thing they're working on, hoping to catch up by 2026.
The 18A, that's the size of the transistors on a chip, right? Smaller the node, more power.
Exactly. It's all about cramming more and more transistors onto that chip. For Intel, that 18A node is make or break, especially if they want to stay in the data center game.
And of course, on top of all that, their big Ohio plant is delayed again. Some folks are saying it might not even be up and running before 2030. That's almost a decade late.
Yeah, keep an eye on that one for sure. Any problems there could really shake things up for the whole tech industry. But speaking of market reactions, did you see Alibaba? Their stock just jumped over 8%.
Alibaba. I thought they were kind of in the doghouse with the Chinese government. What happened?
Well, get this. It seems like it was all thanks to a bunch of patriotic movies doing really well.
Patriotic movies, come on.
I know, right? The success of these films, like Nuza 2, got people feeling really good about Chinese companies, and investors just piled in.
So movie magic is moving the markets now, huh?
That's wild. It really shows you how investor sentiment can shift based on the craziest things. Plus, don't forget, President Xi Jinping met with Jack Ma recently. That could mean the government's easing up on tech companies again.
Interesting. So Intel's fighting legal battles. Alibaba's riding a wave of national pride. It really shows how many different things can affect a company's success. Now, this next one is a little bit of a head-scratcher. Marvell Technology.
They just blew past their earnings estimates. Their CEO was really highlighting how much their data center business has grown, like a 78% increase compared to last year.
Oh, 78%. That's massive.
Yeah, no kidding. But then their stock tanks like 14% after hours.
That makes zero sense. How can a company do so well and then the stock just crashes like that?
It's weird, right? Some analysts are thinking maybe their future projections weren't as rosy as people hoped, or maybe investors are worried they can't keep up that crazy data center growth.
It's a reminder that the market can be totally unpredictable, even when a company seems to be doing great. All right, let's talk quantum computing. Rigetti Computing is making some interesting moves. They're partnering up with Quanta Computer, that manufacturing giant, and we're talking over $200 million here.
Quantum computing, it's like something out of Star Trek. What are they trying to do with all that money?
Well, essentially, they're trying to build the quantum computers of the future, and Quanta's bringing all their manufacturing know-how to the party. And it's not just a partnership either. Quanta's putting their money where their mouth is, investing $35 million in Rigetti.
So this is like a big bet on the future of computing itself. And with IBM and Google already in the quantum race, this could really shake things up.
Big time. Speaking of companies to watch, everybody's looking at Broadcom today. They're supposed to be reporting their first quarter earnings, and people are wondering how they're doing.
Broadcom, right. They're already big in semiconductors, but they've been pushing into software and enterprise security too. It'll be interesting to see what they say. Their new Velocity thing is getting a lot of attention. It's supposed to really improve 5G and satellite services.
Oh yeah, that could be a big deal for telecom companies, huh?
Yeah, potentially huge. If Velocity delivers on its promises, it could be a major growth area for Broadcom. Guess we'll have to wait and see what the earnings say.
Okay, let's move on to a company that's never far from the headlines, Tesla, and of course, Elon Musk.
Tesla's stock has been struggling, even with a bit of a rebound today. Some people think it's because Elon Musk is just spread too thin.
Yeah, with Tesla, SpaceX, and now Twitter, you got to wonder if it's all just a bit much.
Even Dave Portnoy, the Barstool sports guy, he was saying the same thing, questioning if Musk is really focused on Tesla anymore.
And then Tesla's new car registrations were down in January. That doesn't help.
Not at all. It'll be interesting to see how they handle all this in the next few months. Now, for something a little different, let's talk about Bird Construction. They're not a household name, but they're quietly making some serious moves in the construction sector.
Bird Construction, okay. What have they been up to?
They've been winning a ton of new projects. Like, we're talking $470 million worth. One of them is their first ever integrated project delivery project. It's up in Atlantic Canada.
Integrated project delivery. That's a mouthful. What is that?
It's basically a different way of doing construction. Everybody works together more closely and shares both the risks and the rewards.
That makes sense. What else are they working on?
Well, they're doing some work on nuclear facilities, a big recreation center redevelopment in Kelowna, British Columbia, and a whole bunch of other projects in different areas.
Wow, sounds like they're keeping busy. With a portfolio that diverse, bird construction is definitely worth keeping an eye on. Now, before we move on, let's swing back to cybersecurity for a minute. Jim Cramer is really doubling down on CrowdStrike.
Yeah, he's buying more shares for his charitable trust even after their stock dropped like 6%.
That's bold. What makes him so sure about CrowdStrike, especially when the market's not really feeling it?
He thinks the analysts are being too negative, and the company's CEO just gave this really stark warning about how bad the cybersecurity situation is right now. Apparently, hackers can get into systems in less than a minute.
Yikes. That's scary. It really makes you realize how important cybersecurity is these days.
Okay, now for something completely different. Let's talk about work-life balance, billionaire CEO style.
Always an interesting topic. We've got Mark Cuban, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, the whole gang. I'm curious to hear what they have to say.
Well, Mark Cuban, the billionaire owner of the Dallas Mavericks, he basically says that work-life balance is easy when you're rich. He can spend time with his family whenever he wants, travel, do whatever he wants because money's not an issue.
It sounds amazing, right? But I'm guessing it wasn't always that easy for him.
Yeah, you're right. He says that when he was building his businesses, work-life balance was totally out the window. He was working all the time, sleeping on floors, the whole 9 yards.
So classic, hustle now, enjoy later kind of thing.
Exactly. Put in the hard work early on and then enjoy the rewards later. But as we'll see, not all billionaires agree with that approach. And on that note, we have Elon Musk. Nobody ever changed the world on 40 hours a week. That's his motto, right?
Oh, yeah. Typical Elon, got to push it to the limit.
Yeah.
But seriously, how sustainable is that? Doesn't that just lead to burnout?
It's a good question. Now, Jeff Bezos, he's got a different take. He talks about work-life harmony instead of balance.
So it's not about separating work and life completely, but more about making them work together.
That's the idea. Bezos says you should find stuff you love outside of work that gives you energy and makes you feel good. He even thinks that can make you better at your job, too.
Interesting. It's like finding that sweet spot where everything clicks.
Right. And then there's Jack Ma from Alibaba. He actually endorsed that crazy 996 work culture, 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week.
996, that's just brutal. I can't imagine doing that for very long.
He called it a huge blessing, which, I don't know, sparked a lot of debate about whether he's glamorizing overwork.
It's a good reminder that what's normal in one culture might be totally crazy in another.
Definitely. Now, Jamie Dimon from JP Chase, he's got a different approach. He's all about personal responsibility. He says it's up to you to create your own work-life balance, not your company's job.
So set your own boundaries, figure it out yourself kind of thing. That's a pretty bold statement coming from a CEO.
He even said, it's your job to take care of yourself, your family, your health, everything. It's not our job.
Wow. I mean, I get the whole personal accountability thing, but doesn't the company have some responsibility too? Like creating a healthy work environment, preventing burnout, that kind of thing.
Yeah, it's complicated. There's no easy answer. What works for one person might not work for another. Everybody's got to figure out what's best for them.
Totally. All right, let's zoom out to the global stage for a bit and talk about trade tensions. President Trump's new tariffs are stirring things up.
Yeah, he's targeting Canada, Mexico, and China. Some people are praising him for protecting American jobs and industries, but others are worried it'll start a global trade war and drive up prices for everyone.
Sounds like a tricky situation.
Yeah.
So the auto industry got a bit of a break, right?
Yeah, car companies were going to get hit with a 25% tariff on vehicles imported from Canada and Mexico, but the White House backed off for a month after Ford, General Motors, and Stellantis all pushed back.
Makes sense. Those companies have huge supply chains across North America. But what about the bigger picture? How are these tariffs affecting other industries and countries?
Well, Canada and Mexico didn't just take it lying down. They hit back with their own tariffs on U.S. goods. It's a classic tit for tat. Kind of reminds me what happened during Trump's first term when all those trade disputes were happening.
It's like a high-stakes game of chess. Every move has consequences. But here's a weird one. Some people think that certain countries, like the UK, could actually benefit from all this. How does that even work?
I know it sounds strange, but think about it. If the U.S. cuts back on trade with China, it leaves a gap that other countries can fill. The UK, for example, they might be able to export more stuff to the U.S. or attract foreign investment that would have gone to China before.
So there could be some winners in this trade war after all.
Maybe, but global trade is super complicated. It's hard to predict how all this will play out in the long run. What helps one country might hurt another.
True, it's all connected. Speaking of connected, did you hear about that Panama Canal deal? A Hong Kong billionaire just sold his stake in two major ports on the canal to a U.S.-led group.
Oh, yeah, that's interesting. The timing is kind of suspicious, don't you think? Especially with all Trump's talk about wanting to take control of the canal.
Yeah, he's been saying for years that the U.S. should be in charge, talking about national security and all that. But Panama has been pretty clear that they're not giving up control of their canal.
So maybe this sale is a way to keep the U.S. happy, like
Yeah.
reassuring them that China doesn't have too much influence over the canal.
It's crazy how business and politics are all mixed up like that.
Yeah.
And with all these tariffs flying around, you never know what's going to happen next. But before we move on, I think it's important to remember that the idea of some countries benefiting from these trade wars is really complicated. It's not a simple win-lose situation.
Right, there are always trade-offs. What benefits one country might hurt another.
Exactly. It's a good reminder to think critically about these things and not jump to conclusions. Now let's shift gears back to the U.S. and take another look at those different perspectives on work-life balance from those billionaire CEOs. I always find it fascinating to hear how such successful people approach that challenge.
Yeah, it's really interesting to see how their different philosophies might have shaped their careers and the companies they built.
Absolutely. So we've already talked about Mark Cuban, Elon Musk, Jeff Bezos, Jack Ma, and Jamie Dimon, but let's dig a little deeper into some of their ideas.
Good idea. Let's start with Mark Cuban again. Remember, he's the guy who said work-life balance is easy when you're rich, but he's also quick to point out that he wasn't always rich. He had to hustle and grind just like everyone else.
Right. He was working multiple jobs, sleeping on floors, putting in the time.
And that's kind of his point. Work-life balance looks different at different stages of your life.
It's like you got to pay your dues before you can reap the rewards.
Exactly. Now, Elon Musk, he's a different story. He's all about pushing yourself to the limit, working crazy hours, and achieving those big, audacious goals.
Remember that quote? Nobody ever changed the world on 40 hours a week.
Classic Elon. But while that kind of dedication is super impressive, you also have to wonder if it's sustainable in the long run. Burnout is a real thing, and you can't just ignore it.
It's all about finding that balance, right?
Exactly. Now, Jeff Bezos, he talks about work-life harmony instead of balance. He says it's about finding things outside of work that give you energy and make you feel fulfilled.
And he actually believes those things can make you better at your job, too.
Yeah, he thinks it's all connected, finding that synergy between different parts of your life.
Interesting. It's like finding that sweet spot where everything clicks. Now, Jack Ma, he's got a very different perspective. He actually endorsed that 996 work culture in China, working from 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., 6 days a week.
Yeah, that's intense. And it definitely sparked a lot of controversy, people accusing him of glamorizing overwork.
It's a good reminder that cultural norms play a big role in how we view work-life balance. What might be considered normal in one place could be seen as totally crazy somewhere else.
For sure. Now, Jamie Dimon, the CEO of JP Morgan Chase, he's all about personal accountability. He says it's your job to create your own work-life balance, not the company's job.
Remember that quote. It's your job to take care of yourself, your family, your health, everything. It's not our job.
Yep, that's Jamie Dimon for you. Straight shooter.
It's a bold statement, and it definitely raises some questions about the role of companies in creating a healthy work environment. But it also highlights the importance of taking ownership of your own well-being.
Definitely. It's a complex issue with no easy answers.
All right, so we've talked about Intel, Alibaba, those trade tensions, and even got some billionaire wisdom on work-life balance. It's been a busy day in the financial world.
It really has. And there's always something new to learn, right?
Absolutely. So as we wrap up, what are some of the big things that stood out to you today? What should we be thinking about going forward?
Well, that whole thing with Alibaba and the patriotic movies really got me thinking. You know, how something so unexpected can suddenly send a stock soaring.
It's crazy, right? It's a reminder that the market can be influenced by all sorts of things we might not even think about.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, what's the next weird thing that's going to shake things up?
Who knows, right? But it's definitely a good reminder to keep an open mind and expect the unexpected. Another thing that stood out to me was that whole debate about tariffs. Trying to find that balance between protecting American jobs and keeping the global economy humming along.
It's a tough one for sure. There are strong arguments on both sides, and it's not an easy problem to solve.
It really makes you think about the interconnectedness of everything.
Yeah.
What happens in one part of the world can have ripple effects everywhere else.
That's for sure. Global economics, it's a complex beast.
Well said. All right, before we sign off, I want to leave our listeners with something to chew on. In a world where we're bombarded with information 24/7, how do we stay informed without getting totally overwhelmed?
That's a great question. I think it's all about being selective, choosing your sources carefully and focusing on quality over quantity.
That makes sense. It's about filtering out the noise and finding the signal, and maybe even taking a break from the news every now and then.
That's probably a good idea too.
Well, on that note, it's time to wrap up another episode of the Daily Financial News Roundup.
Thanks for having me. It's always a pleasure talking about all things finance.
And a huge thank you to all our listeners for tuning in. We'll be back again tomorrow with more news and analysis from the world of business and finance. Until then, remember, stay informed, stay curious, and keep those questions coming.